I was torn on Nick Saban's comments last night. I'm glad he said them to a degree because I think Jimbo Fisher needs to be called out, and I think this whole process needs to be called out. And I think more and more coaches need to be pointing fingers directly at other people. But as I also have said about Nick Saban lately, I'm glad he's saying the things he's saying. But where I lose respect for him is then he's not walking the walk. He's talking the talk, and it needs everything he said needed to be said.
Yes.
But then you aren't like, is he the right guy to say it? From the standpoint of he is the best coach of this generation, yes, he needs to say it. But then it's like, but dude, look what you're doing with the transfer portal, right? Like, and I think that's what he was saying last night. He's like, look, I don't want to go this route, but if you don't change it, I will. I think it was almost like he was issuing a threat to college football. Like, look, we're not paying for high school players yet. Not that way. Not with NIL. They've been doing other stuff for years. Exactly. You know that, right? You know, but not the $2 million contracts to a high school kid. I mean, a lot of coaches are rightfully appalled by that. They should be appalled by that. But Vince is Nick is basically saying, and this is what he has said all along. Look, I'm going to do what the thing allows me to do. And if we got the number 2 class last year and we weren't buying players in NIL deals. Right. If this, because this is the part that's being overlooked of his comments. Everybody's focusing on what he said about A&M, but they're overlooking the fact that he said after that, we haven't done that yet, but we're going to have to, basically. And I'm going to find the direct quote because I did put it in the article I wrote about it last night. But he made very clear that Bama's not doing that right now, but they will. He said we didn't buy one player right now with NIL, but I don't know if we're going to be able to sustain that in the future because more and more people are doing it. So he's basically saying, if you don't fix it, then I'm going to start doing it, and we're going to do it better than you're doing it. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be back to where we were before, where you're not getting the top recruits because now Alabama's buying them.
Right.
And so that's the part I liked. And I don't mind that he pointed out Jimbo Fisher. Jimbo Fisher needed to be called out. And we can – Ryan, are you ready to go? Are you ready to rock and roll? Okay. Like, to me, guys, the bigger thing for me too is I thought Jimbo Fisher's response to it was so classic Jimbo because he's an immature child who got super indignant and self-righteous, acted so – I mean, that was one of the most – and I tweeted about this. It was one of the most childish, petty, unprofessional press conference ever. You could have hammered Saban and done it with some class, but Jimbo has no clue how to do that because he doesn't have any. It was an incredible bad look. Now, the media is going to jump up on it because they're trying to turn college football into the WWE, right? And so, this is great. I think it's terrible for the game that you've got 2 of the biggest names in the game acting like little children. And it's just like Notre Dame has a 36-year-old first-year head coach who would never dream of acting like that big of a baby, in my opinion, from what we know of him. And then the other thing is Nick Saban, I don't believe, ever said Texas A&M is cheating. He said he bought players. There's a difference because there's people that will argue that what Jimbo Fisher did is legal in Texas, even though it's against NCAA rules, right? Which is not a great argument to make because it has been legal in some states to smoke weed, but you still can't smoke weed before you go play in the NCAA tournament. If you get caught, you get in trouble, right? Now, I don't know if those rules are changing, but just because something is a rule in your state doesn't mean it's a rule that you can follow in your football program if you're part of a bigger organization. But Jimbo is kind of like that, I believe he doth protest too much. You know what I mean? Like he got so indignant about it and he got so petty about it. And it's like, I kind of feel like he walked right into Nick Saban's trap because basically it's kind of like, in a lawsuit, right? Like if you sue me, if I come at you because I know you did something and you try to sue me to silence me, it's going to be like, well, I hope you sue me because that means I'm going to open you up to discovery, right? That's why some people won't sue someone else. Like I'd love to sue him, but if I sue him, he's going to get discovery and then I got to give him all this stuff and I don't want people to see that, right? And so when when Jimbo started kind of going into you should talk to him and look in his closet, it's kind of like you just walked right into his trap, and it's not going to go well because most assistant coaches are publicly going to side with Nick Saban, in my opinion, because they're not stupid enough to go against him like Jimbo is. And I wish Nick Saban would actually say the things that Joey Molinaro said in his little skit of, "How are you going to go 8-4 and play in the Cotton Bowl or Outback Bowl? Congrats." You know what I mean? Like, but the bigger thing too, Vince, is I'm now very curious to see how bad Alabama is going to destroy Texas A&M this year, because they were already going to blow them out because A, Texas A&M is not that good, and B, because they were going to get payback for last year. But now there will be no mercy. There will be no mercy. That is going to be, in my opinion, a ugly, ugly game, and I'm looking forward to seeing if there's any kind of handshake after the fact. It's going to be quite interesting. So
he just came off. I mean, you used the word childish, and I felt like that was kind of the best way to sort of phrase it, right? For me, it just seemed like he was very, I didn't do anything wrong. You do things wrong, even though technically Nick Saban didn't actually say you did anything illegal. Right. It was just more like, kind of
did something unethical, not illegal, is basically
exactly.
It's kind of like Jimbo's that guy at the club that gets challenged to a fight and he wants no part of the fight because he knows he's going to get his butt whooped. So he tries to get really loud and indignant and hoping that his body language and loud voice can intimidate you from fighting. That's Jimbo, right? But because he knows, and if I get into this fight, I'm going to lose. I mean, he knows that. And then the real interesting thing is when they started asking about the collectives, and he wanted to dismiss the collective stuff, like I don't know anything about that, right? Plausible deniability. Hey, man, this is your program. You're responsible for everything that happens in your program. You can't just say, well, I don't know what the collectives are doing. That's bullcrap. And you just admitted that what people are saying is true because you're saying, well, I don't have anything to do with that. I don't even know about that. We, the coaches, didn't do anything. Like, dude, how stupid do you think you are? But the problem is the national media will buy it. That's the point. Because they want the fight, right? Like, because it's good for ratings, it's good for clicks. They want this childish stuff, right?
Right.
It's not good for the game. It's not good for the game at all. What Nick Saban is doing with the transfer portal is not good for the game. What Jimbo did with buying a number 1 ranked recruiting class is not good for the game. And I'm all for him getting called out by Nick Saban. And the best guy calling him out is Lane Kiffin, because he's so much more sarcastic and funny with how he calls out Jimbo, right? He just like, there's the one, and then other people are like, you landed 5 stars in like a 5-year period. But yeah, sure. As soon as NIL pops up after an 8-4 year, you sign 7 5-star players. I'm sure it had nothing to do with NIL. Totally fine. Like, how stupid do you think that we are? But apparently Jimbo thinks we're as stupid as he is. And that at the end of the day, that's the problem with it, because
Jimbo's like, he's like, you ever get in a fight like with your significant other, right? And you're in the wrong, but you just want to deflect and you get louder. Yeah. Like, that's what he came off of, in my opinion.
Bill Burr has a great skit about this. Have you ever heard his skit about this? He's like, if a woman is right and she knows she's right, she will stay on point and she won't let you get off of it. But if she's wrong, she'll start throwing these wild haymakers to try to just get you mad and call her a name. You got to, it's so classic. He's like, so if she starts straying off course, you stay right in there because, bob and weave, and because you've won the fight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what this is. He knows he's wrong, so he's just trying to get real loud and indignant. He's trying to deflect off of what he has done onto, this other thing. And look, it's not, I don't think it's going to end well for him. I really don't. I don't think this is going to go the way he thinks it's going to go. And
yeah, I talked to someone earlier, Brian, that was kind of, you mentioned a little bit, like some people are like, oh, good for Jimbo standing up for himself and stuff. And I'm just like, what exactly does Jimbo get out of this? Like, what's the positive to him doing this? Because I agree with you. Next year, as if Alabama didn't have a chip on their shoulder from losing against Zach Calzada last year. Like, what is going to happen now, man? That is going to be a rough game, in my opinion, for Texas A&M next year. I just don't understand what. I don't
because he's not thinking, Ryan.
The Jimbo gets.
Yeah. There's no strategy to this. This is him emotionally, like the as soon as I heard they had a press conference that early in the day, I was like, oh, this is going to be hilarious, because someone else would have taken a more reasoned, like, okay, we're going to release an initial statement. Let me kind of calm myself down. He was all emotion, and it's like, going after a 17-year-old. Like, some of the stuff Nick Saban said was like, okay, I think Nick Saban, I didn't hear him say that in the clip, but he's quoted as talking about Travis Hunter getting $1 million from Jackson State. That I thought was I didn't like that.
Yeah.
Because again, that's the one thing I agree with Jimbo is don't bring a recruit's name into the conversation. If you want to go after Dion, then use Dion's name, right? Go after the grown-up in the room. If you think Dion bought a kid, then you call Dion out. You don't call Travis Hunter out, right? Whether you say his name or you refer to a recruit that got it. I don't think that was appropriate. But the point of what he's saying is right. And this is the whole thing that bothers me is like, well, Saban cheats. So look, just because he does what he does doesn't mean what he's saying isn't correct. Right. And that's the thing is like that someone's character shouldn't dismiss the rightness or the wrongness of what they're saying. It can maybe dismiss like maybe you shouldn't be the guy saying it, but what he's saying is correct. And the difference between what Saban and what Jimbo is saying is Jimbo is just acting like a petulant child. Nick Saban is speaking truth. Now, whether or not he's being hypocritical or not is a different conversation for a different day. I would argue he is, but Nick Saban has also said, I'm going to do what they allow me to do, but they shouldn't allow me to do this. That's the difference. That's the difference between Nick Saban and Jimbo Fisher. Jimbo Fisher wants all the rules to be, we need to get Congress involved. Yes, that's a smart idea. Continue to show your stupidity by saying Congress is going to be the rescuer of college football. Like, is there a more incompetent group of people in our country right now than our federal government? And they're going to be the saviors of our game. So it's just a really stupid thing. And I'm glad Jimbo's getting called out. He's been a fraud his whole career. He is getting all this love. Like CBS Sports did a thing where they dropped their top 25 coaches. They had him 5th. The guy's gone like 8-4, 8-4, 9-5. The only good year he had was the COVID year. We had to play anybody out of conference, and they still struggled to beat a North Carolina team that didn't have either of their 1,000-yard running backs or their 1,000-yard receiver or their best linebacker. So Jimbo's a fraud. He won a championship off of a loaded team that played against a crap ACC schedule. And if Auburn had a quarterback that could complete a pass beyond 5 yards, they wouldn't even beat Auburn in that title game. So I'm not, as y'all can tell, I'm not a big fan of Jimbo Fisher and his old holier than thou, self-righteous, OG, our poor picked on Texas A&M. We didn't do anything wrong. It's funny, Ryan. I was watching. What was the game? I was watching the game from '93. It might have been the Notre Dame Michigan game from '93, and they broke to a commercial, or they broke to like going back to CBS, main desk to the latest news, and it was about how Texas A&M had a bunch of guys suspended for taking money that for work they didn't do. And it's like, well, some things never change. You know what I mean? And I just thought that was hilarious. But he's a huge pain in the butt. He's a petulant child, and he needs to be careful because eventually you're going to kind of run your mouth too much. When you say open up, when you challenge, hey, look into that guy's past, the reality is eventually they're going to look into yours.